here.
Seattle Children's wants every child to live the healthiest and most fulfilling life possible. That includes making sure children and teens are protected from COVID-19. COVID-19 vaccines are safe and will help protect your child from illness and hospitalization. This isn't about beating the odds, it's about changing them for all kidkind. Get your child vaccinated today.
Good afternoon. I am really thrilled to be here today with you. My name is Elaine Sulkin, and I am the publisher and CEO of Parent Map. As always, we are really thrilled to have put together one of what we consider to be the most extraordinary consortium of parenting media in the country. And we welcome our partners and audience from Chicago Parent, Metro Family in Detroit, New York Family, and New Jersey Family to bring you the 22-23 Parent Ed Speaker Series. And today we particularly are thrilled to have you join us for the Habits of Highly Effective Adolescents with Kastner Carter and Laura Kastner. So on behalf of our magnificent partners across the country, many of us have been in this parent education and information business for a long time. I'm particularly proud. I'm covering my face. I'm particularly proud. It's our 20th anniversary, and just a quick view at our covers really reflects our passion for providing serious content and fun content. And our business is really collectively to build inclusive, safe, educated, and loving communities to better serve families. So we are laser focused on that. It's why we bring you this lecture series, amongst other things. And being the parents and publishers that we are, I'd say we never are okay with the status quo. So thanks for joining. Before we kick off our learning with Kastner and Laura, we would love for you to just click into the chat and let us know where you're joining from. We've had incredible representation from around the country, as well as Nigeria and Australia. So let us know where you're coming from. And while you're doing that, I just want to remind everyone that this will be recorded. We will use it promotionally, and everyone who registered will get a copy of the talk so that they can listen to it at their leisure. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. So the Zoom chat feature is open for you to share comments and questions, and we will funnel those to Kastner and Laura, who are planning to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll do a Q&A. So we encourage you to ask questions during that time. And then also closed caption is enabled, and if you can click in the Zoom closed caption CC if you want to use that. So thank you again to our media partners. As I said, Chicago Parent, Metro Parent in Detroit, New Jersey Family, and New York Family. And a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Seattle Children's Hospital, and our platinum event partner, Gates Foundation Discovery Center, and then gold sponsors, Charles Wright Academy, Dartmoor School, Hyla School, Thera Healthcare, and Washington College Savings Plan. Kastner Carter is a sociologist and author of The New Adolescents, Raising Happy and Successful Teens in an Age of Anxiety and Distraction, The Sweet Spot, How to Accomplish More by Doing Less, and Raising Happiness, 10 Simple Steps for More Joyful Kids and Happier Parents. Kastner draws on scientific research to help people lead their most courageous, meaningful, and productive lives. And our friend, Dr. Laura Kastner, is author of a number of parenting books, including the indispensable Getting to Calm, Cool-Headed Strategies for Parenting Tweens and Teens, Wise-Minded Parenting, 7 Essentials for Raising Successful Teens, and Getting to Calm, the Early Years. Laura is a clinical professor of psychiatry and behavioral science at the University of Washington. And I am overjoyed to welcome both of you and to turn it over to Laura and to Kastner. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Yes, we're so glad you're here. Thank you to Parent Map, Brenna, Elaine, Patty, the crew at Parent Map, and from all of you that are joining us across the country. It was so fun to see all those places, wasn't it, Christine? Hello,
It
New
was.
York,
It's
Chicago,
great.
the UK. We're glad you're here for the big connect. So I'm just going to start out with the title, of course, because people want to know what the habits of highly effective teenagers are. So why don't you start us off there, Christine?
Okay. Well, I think we have some new habits of highly effective teenagers these days, and what makes for effective teenagers, I think with a lot of what we're going to talk about today, it also makes for effective parents, right? So a lot of these things, there are some skills that have really risen to the forefront. There are three that I focus on in my book that I think are really important. And the first is connection. And by connection, I mean in-person connection, which has, become a hot topic, as we know, because of the pandemic. But even before the pandemic, we were really seeing this as, something that we need to really help our kids build. The second is focus. Our ability to control our attention, both for our adults, but also for kids, is when our adolescents is when we really learn to control our attention. Has really changed in the last 10 to 15 years. And it is the superpower of the 21st century, really. Affects how we learn, or how our kids learn. I use the word kids, that today we're really talking about adolescents, and we can talk a little bit more about what that even means. But so connection, focus, and rest. Rest is the third skill that I really like parents to focus on. And by rest, I mean, of course, downtime, sort of less stimulating free time, less structured free time for teens have so little. But then, of course, the mother of them all is really sleep from a rest standpoint. So we can talk about each of those and how it plays out if you want.
Well, a lot of times when people talk about habits, they really are sort of listing a bunch of stuff that we should be doing, to be healthy people, things like goal setting and time management and taking care of your health and exercise, nutrition and sleep and loving relationships and friendship development and active learning and, active engagement with activities in the community and so forth. And yet what you're talking about is the fuel. How do you do all that development of good, healthy lifestyle? It takes rest, it takes connection, it takes credibility as a parent when you're trying to influence those things. But when you try to break down some of those beautiful concepts, talk to us a little bit more about motivating.
Yeah, the thing that I just want to say about the connection between habits and these three categories of sort of buckets of things, it's really skill development. We develop skills best when we do small things every day, right? And so it's better to be in the habit. I should have said this up front. I didn't. It's better to be in the habit of these things that lead to, the habit of getting enough sleep, for example, leads to having adequate rest. The habit of having some in-person interactions with your family and your friends every day leads to a strong sense of social connection, etc. Okay. So now that I sort of backtracked a little bit, I forgot what you just asked me. So if you
motivate,
motivation.
What frustrates me is I see so many lists of the, good habits of good people and all that. And I go, well, that's easy to list, but it's much harder, especially with teenagers with hormones and independence and their individuation and their job to, sort of challenge the dominant paradigm, that we're trying to influence them to have these healthy habits. And yet, it's a sketchy time to have top-down control, as we know. So I think a lot of parents are wondering, how do you influence your children to have these healthy habits?
Yeah, so such a great question. I really like to come back. I always find myself coming back to self-determination theory as one of the best ways that we as parents can influence our kids. That's a very nerdy name, but I just know that Laura knows exactly what I'm talking about and she can do it. Your parents, I'm sure you don't, and that is perfectly fine. It's our job to explain it. Basically, what we know about human motivation is that there are three core psychological needs that if any one of them is thwarted, we tend to have trouble with self-motivation. And so these three psychological needs are a great opportunity for us as parents. I find them very approachable to what ways to influence our kids is by bolstering these psychological needs. So the first one, so that all three of them, I'm going to give them to you, and then we can talk about the three of them. The first one is autonomy. The second is competence, and the third is connection, again, or relatedness. And so let's just talk about them briefly individually, because these really are one of the best ways, I think, to influence our kids, to motivate them to develop those healthy habits, or to, we might want them to get enough sleep, but be unsure of how to influence that once they get to be a certain age. Okay, so autonomy is really about giving them more freedom than our culture today tends to recommend from a well, I should actually say it's not like culturally, we're just in the habit, I think now, of tracking our kids, for example, and they just don't have the private lives that they used to. A generation ago, parents didn't necessarily know where their kids. I mean, when I was a teenager, my parents never knew where I was. I had an entire secret life at school, and also after school. And it didn't, it wasn't. It gave me independence in a sense of autonomy. Now, parents can track their kids, be very, very, very involved in what they're doing during the day and how well they are doing in school. So this autonomy piece of things is really important. It's really about not telling them directly what to do all the time, right? Not telling them where they need to be, how they need to be, what they want. It's about not, giving them the freedom to fail and then not be able to blame us as their parents when they do or succeed, and not feel like it's our success or because of us. It's about not nagging, right? Like when we nag our kids, it's they don't tend to monitor themselves as much, but they just wait to be reminded because they know that external monitoring is happening, and this makes them feel really dependent, which they will then resist again in order to gain that autonomy, because that this is a core psychological need. So, practical ways to this is a fun subject for me because I am like the world's bossiest person, but I feel I was born bossy. My parents tell me I came out of the womb telling other people what to do. So this is the least natural thing for me, to just let the people around me have a ton of autonomy. I've had to work on it a lot. And, my kids, I have 4 kids, they're all grown now. The youngest is 20. But I wrote this book, and obviously when I was raising them, and they would all tell you that sometimes my only strategy is to ask them questions instead of telling them what to do, right? And my favorite question, my go-to question when I just was biting my tongue wanting to tell them exactly what to do, or to give them advice, was, what's your plan? Right. So, what's your plan for getting your homework done? Right. So it's sort of preserving that autonomy. It's like borderline nagging. At one point, the kids they always joke about making t-shirts for me that say, "What's your plan?" Or, "I'm not bossy. People just need direction."
Right.
All that.
Yeah, I have a family I'm working with right now, and that has been off the table. They're not allowed, the parents are not allowed to say that, because they say it's a tick. You have a tick, and it is, what is your plan? But the really cool thing you do in both of your books, Christine, that I've told you before is really novel, is motivational interviewing. Because most people don't, it's something in our world, of psychology, but often it's not shared with parents. And it is, of course, about asking questions, and it gets you out of nagging and directing and over managing. But it is unusual. And I thought what you could do is describe a little of it, because of course it's more complicated than just ask questions, because that could be over interviewing. And then I thought I'd use one of the questions that came into us as a little example of what would you do with this, Dr. Carter, to motivate this teenager with this dilemma. So first talk about what motivational interview is.
Yeah, motivational interviewing is something that Ron Dahl, who is a researcher at UC Berkeley, taught me. And I will say he just taught it to me in a couple of sessions as a strategy. So I know that people take study this for years, practice it for years, right? It's much more complicated than just a few strategies here and there. But I have found it to be a really, for me anyway, a really effective way to reorient myself towards really seeing and really hearing what my teen is trying to say. So the gist of it is to try and understand their existing motivations and to work with those existing motivations. So there is no telling about what you think, or advice giving, or judging, or freaking out in motivational interviewing. There is a lot of asking questions, and really listening to the response, and then sometimes mirroring that response back, sometimes mirroring back what you think that your kid is feeling, right? Trying to, there's a little bit of interpretation, but it's always like a check, tell me. I always say, one of my mantras is, tell me where I'm wrong, right? Tell me where I'm wrong. I think what you're trying to say is this, right? And so to just, I think that's really the foundation of it.
Right.
What did I miss?
Well, that what is their goal? Are they getting closer and farther to goal? So you keep focusing on what they want to focus on, which of course you talk about a lot with intrinsic motivation. But let's use one of our audience's questions. That she has a sophomore in high school, and his goal of life is becoming a e-athlete. Some of you don't know that that's a thing. That gaming is a passion, but some people really want to make it a professional goal. He does, and he makes B's. He's not interested in doing much more than B's. He's not interested in a selective college. He just wants to, become proficient in gaming, since he wants to be an Olympian e-gamer at some point. So the parent says, how do I motivate him? Because I want him to do exercise, see friends in real life, and do better at school.
So it's really about looking for their existing motivations, right? And it's the key word is their existing motivations, right? Not yours. So as parents, we're very wise, right? We know, we have real, firm ideas about what we want for our kids and what will be best for our kids. And once they're teenagers, it's not actually just very effective at motivating them by telling them what we want for them or what we think is best. So starting with this teenager's existing motivations and really understanding what they are, right? What are they really after? Probably it's a sense of competence, which is one of those things around self-motivation, right? These are core psychological needs that this kid is probably able to fulfill through that. And so then helping them look at what will help them, that this kid even better meet those sort of core needs, the core motivations, whatever they may be. The core motivation may actually be to be an Olympic e-gamer, right? And if there's nothing else underneath it that can be uncovered, that's fine, right? So then what will help them? What do they need in order to become an Olympic e-gamer, right? Understanding as a parent, how do they get to the next level? What is involved in all of this? What resources do they need? Probably they need the things that are already on your list, right?
Mhm.
They need to get enough sleep. They need to get exercise because this is going to affect reaction times. Like, like tying what you think they need to what they think they need.
Right. Yeah.
And framing it in terms of their existing motivation.
I'm smiling because I'm thinking, yeah, what I need is 10,000 more hours to become a really good gamer. No, but your point is well taken.
Right.
Now, actually, 10,000 hours all in a row would not work out real well. You'd need sleep. And, a part of gaming, as you know, some of the positive benefits is cooperation, social skills, even empathy, because they help each other. So see, I'm already working for you on this campaign, whatever parent was out there asking that. I think a lot of parents are asking questions about technology, which we'll get to.
Can I just say one other thing about this though, too, is that in my experience, a lot of times there is a lot more below the e-gaming piece of things. Sometimes when we feel suspicious as a parent of a place where a kid is spending an awful lot of time, and we don't think it's like an unhealthy amount of time, perhaps, that's where the really having some not long, short, but lots of little conversations, trying to really see what's beneath that behavior, right? So probably it is one of the only areas where this kid feels really like a strong sense of confidence, and maybe also relatedness. Maybe there are friends that are doing this, and that this is a place like they're spending their most time with their friends, and also they feel most confident, or they just know how to get there. And so once we as parents really understand what's beneath it, we can look at like, okay, what are some other ways to fill those needs, to spend time with friends, to develop a sense of self-efficacy or confidence. Yeah.
Right. There are questions coming in, which I'll incorporate into my next question about, when does it become addiction? And of course, one of the problems is when they have certain goals and don't believe that our engine goals like sleep and rest and friendships, promotion, if those things are the same as their goals. So we can talk about that, but there's lots of questions and conversation these days about the role of stress in modern life, and of course, mental health with, some of the statistics that everybody knows about with depression, anxiety, self-harm, eating disorders, suicidality. So people are very concerned about the role of technology in that. And as you point out, and somebody said, and what book are you referring to, Laura Kastner? It is this one, The New Adolescents. See, I read every word on the plane when I didn't have screen time because my screen was dead. And I said, oh, I have this book. I have a great plan B. So I read every word. And in this book, in the beginning, I just want to say, Christine wrote this in 2019. It was published in 20. You would have thought it was like 6 months ago, because you made this point. Everybody's concerned about ChatGPT and all that. And you made the point, which is absolutely brilliant, that technologies usually are in advance of our figuring out what to do with them. And parenting is the same, that, that the technologies are with us, and we're lagging behind in our ability to know what to do about it. And as you said, we need parenting 2.0. I'm going to invite you to just double down on the rest and the connection and the focus, because I think sometimes parents feel overwhelmed with the technology, and so many questions are coming in about what should I do if I feel like I need to take control of the technology role in their life and they won't let me and they're addicted.
Yeah. So I think that when I wrote this book, actually, it was kind of controversial about whether or not these technologies were addictive. And I mean, there was research kind of on both sides. And in 2023, we have seen sort of some really definitive analyses.
Yeah.
I would say it's not controversial anymore.
Right.
These technologies are addictive, and the really problematic one, we shouldn't just say technologies. The really problematic thing is social media.
Yeah.
And it's particularly problematic for girls. And it is really not controversial anymore. Like, social media has been found to be causal of, in particular, depression and anxiety in teenage girls. And that doesn't mean that boys are scot-free in this. Their trends are sort of behind where the girls are. The social comparisons, I think, are very pernicious, and that is something that is pretty gender based right now. So what do parents do about this? So there are a few things like that I think we can do. One is to understand why social media causes anxiety and depression. And the main thing at work here is that there has been a real transition from a play-based childhood that involved a lot of risky, unsupervised play, which is really essential for overcoming fear and fragility. And by play, it's like, let's think about in adolescence, that's teenagers and everything else, like how they play as they hang out, right? Like, and they play games and they, those kinds of things, but like broadening our sense of like, this isn't just little kids, right? So the transition from this play-based childhood and adolescence to a phone-based childhood and adolescence, which really blocks normal human development by taking time away from sleep and from that play and in-person socializing, as well as the causing the addiction and just basically drowning kids in social comparisons that they cannot win. So that's kind of what is happening. What can we do? When our kids are still living with us, we do have a lot more control than they want us to believe, right? Like we own the phones, we own the technology, and it's tricky because we do know that it's not so much as of a dosage effect, meaning like how much time you spend on it, although there is that, right? There's a big difference between spending 2 hours a day on social media and 5 hours a day on social media in terms of how bad it is for kids' mental health. So that does exist, but it's also a network effect, meaning that everyone is socializing in this way. And so as parents, we do things with our individual children, it doesn't tend to affect their cohort, right? Their whole class. And it can lead them to feel, one of the things that I always worry, I was very restrictive as a parent, and I was always very worried about the fact that, my kids were always being left out, right? It can make them more isolated, right? When we sort of double down. So I think that the best approach, and I am so interested in what you have to say about this, but one of the better approaches with this is to really focus on how we can go back to a different types of behaviors and build those things in to our kids' cohort to the extent that we can, right? So I was just working with a parent who is a stay-at-home mom and picks her kids up from school every day, and or doesn't sort of like leave them to kind of hang out, but they happen to go to a school where their phones are not allowed. That doesn't mean that no kids ever look at phones, but for the most part, it's not a part of the norm. And so one strategy for this is to leave kids at school for much longer, right? Let them hang out where they have no phone, where phones are not allowed. Now that is a strategy for younger kids, of course, than older teenagers once they're sort of autonomous. But if there is a place where you can leave kids to get in-person interaction where the influence of the phone is minimized, if not, it's unrealistic to eliminate it altogether.
Yeah. I mean, I know that a lot of the parents here have younger children, and that's good, because I would agree with you. If you start early on with healthy habits of a family life, where they go to school, they come home, the after school things start happening as a regular, 2 to 5 day commitment in middle school and then high school. And if they're in organized sports or service or some kind of talent development, and then they come home and they have dinner, and then they, have a sleep time posted, and they have their homework and they have their chores, there's not that much time to become addicted to social media. But part of it is parents becoming resolved that they are going to keep these healthy habits going. Yes. Even in the face of what I call the I don't want to phase. No, I don't want to take a sport. I don't want. You're saying, actually, it's my job. American Academy of Pediatrics says I'm supposed to make sure you get exercise. So you're going to have to sign up for something. And, you can choose what. It can be underwater basket weaving, but, it has to be something. And you just throw it off to the American Academy of Pediatrics, and that you have to. Sort of like vaccinations and getting your teeth clean, and you got to be in a sport. That takes up so much time. And the benefits of self-esteem, learning a skill, pro-social peers, adult mentors. There's so many hours away from cell phones, because you can't play basketball and use a cell phone, as far as I know. So there's a real advantage in having these healthy habits. And then when the middle schooler, 6th grader says, I don't want it, you say, ooh, we'll negotiate what you want to do. But some of these ingredients are as important as dental care. So I think that resolution is really hard, because, boy, when kids get fierce, it is really easy to be mowed over. And so, again, the parent network that supports you saying, yeah, this is what we do. The dentist and, sports, or, underwater basket weaving, whatever it takes, so that you're not looking like you're trying to make some kind of superstar designer child out of them. You're just doing health 101, right. And it does diminish the hours of social media.
I think too, having like in your home, having times and places in which you never, ever have cell phones, right? Like it starts to form better habits. So never, ever having cell phones at the dinner table, right? This was something that was really hard to get my mom, my kid's grandmother, to, because she always wanted to take pictures, right? But really no phones, not even to control the music, ever enter the dining spaces. Right. This is very hard at first, but then quickly becomes a habit that your kids will learn to lean on a little bit, to give them a break. The other thing is no screens in the bedrooms, for as long as you can. Right. And certainly not in the evening, and definitely not finding a charging station that they can't sneak to, right? Exactly. Like for us, it was our closet. Like I had to have a charging station in the master bed or the primary bedroom closet, right? Because the kids wouldn't come in the middle of the night. The kitchen, they would.
Yeah. And of course, all this means we need to clip our wings on this stuff too. And, parents, I think one cool thing about having children is it cleans up our act a little bit. I remember the first time I had my baby in the backpack and I was about to jaywalk, and I went, oh, I can't do this anymore. Darn it. Because at some point my kid is going to know I'm jaywalking. So I have to clean up my act on my language, on my jaywalking, all sorts of things. And
texting while driving, right? Looking at the phone, all these things. I think that's right. Yeah. I think a lot of times, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. You want to finish that thought?
I just think that we do things for our kids that we wouldn't do for ourselves. And now, with all of these things, like if it feels too overwhelming to do it for your kids, to do, get your kids to do, just make sure you're doing it yourself. So at least you're modeling the behavior. That is the first place to start.
Yeah. I want to talk about a sociologist's question, and then we're going to go all to other people's questions that have already come in. And that is about Generation Alpha, because right now, the teens alive today are just ending the Gen Z, and we're starting to have Gen Alpha, who are now 10 to 13 years old. And I think they're the first generation that's 100% wired from birth, right? They're around wired. I think this is the 50th anniversary of the cell phone this month, and more people have access to a cell phone than a toilet that works. So that sort of tells you where we are with wiredness. And there are lots of ways to characterize Generation Alpha, but one that I hear a lot of is their fear about the future. They're afraid of school shootings. They're afraid of climate change. They're afraid of, still the standard, what world are we inheriting, And when I just had my first teenage patient say, I've been just so afraid of getting into college, but now I'm afraid of AI taking my jobs of the future. So they're afraid of AI in the future. Yeah. So as a sociologist, Christine, what would you tell parents about these fears and facing challenges with their kids?
Right. So this points to maybe a fourth major skill that we need to help build in them, and that's the ability to cope with uncertainty. Right. So there's many things that are happening right now. You pointed to a lot of them, but I think one of them is that there is this expectation of comfort, right? That we will that we will be happy, that our lives will be comfortable, and there is something pernicious about that sort of the expectation that the way we have come to learn to parent is to really try and prevent discomfort and difficulty and disappointment in our kids, and so dealing with that is one, is really important. And then also giving them real skills for dealing with uncertainty. So uncertainty is a form of discomfort. I think that the discomfort piece of things, the difficulty piece of things, when we step in and try and prevent disappointment in our kids, for example, they learn that they can't handle difficulty, hard emotions, anything that edges towards pain, right, and suffering. And they're right, they can't handle it because they've never been given the practice. And when we don't let them practice on that difficulty, right, they not only do they start to feel entitled to a life free from discomfort, but they also start to be very afraid that they cannot handle what is coming, right? They see all of these things that are terrible and they in our environment and our culture and society, and they don't feel a sense of agency, right? Like, I can meet climate change, right? I will be the one to develop the technologies that stop it. My actions will have an effect on this. I can do something to prevent school shootings. They just don't feel the same sort of agency that those of us who were raised in the 70s definitely did, right? And so that's one thing. The other thing is parents. So letting your kids learn to deal with difficulty and discomfort is actually really very important for them learning to manage anxiety and fear about the future. The other thing is giving them the tools that they need to deal with uncertainty and this sort of rapidly accelerating change, right? That creates all this ambiguity and uncertainty about the future. This is the rate of change is increasing. This is new to this era that we're living in, and so we need to develop new skills. And I think the old skills, the old ways of coping with uncertainty that we have just don't work, right? Trying to control things as parents, right? Like our own children's uncertain future. I'm speaking for myself. Control is a way that is natural for me to try to cope with uncertainty, but it's very ineffective in this. So the opposite of uncertainty is actually presence. And I think that teaching our kids mindfulness, or whatever you want to call it, which is just a focus on their actual experience in the present moment, non-judgmentally, right? So how are you actually feeling right now? in this moment? Where do you feel it in your body? How can you bring a sense of like, I know you're very, very worried about the future, but what is in front of you right now, right? Like bringing their thoughts to their present experience and practicing that again and again and again can help them integrate their emotions, integrate their fears, meet life where it is, and then take the next best step forward.
Right. Yeah, great wisdom. Given that you're the happiness queen, it says a lot when you say, even in your book, that it's a problem to be in the relentless hunt for happiness. And I think that's really important to say, that life is struggle. Life is a series of problems, and it's how we meet those. And part of it is the stress management, another skill, right? And, mindfulness isn't just another, kind of like fluffy thing. It's really a technical thing to keep your autonomic nervous system calm so that you can solve problems and meet challenges. So, one of the things I'm always struck by is that we say we want rest, we say we want calming of the system, and yet when kids come home and we all come home, we're stressed out, and then we rev each other up with our demands and needs and whatever hassles and nagging, and then we're actually not helping our children calm so that they can face their challenges. So there are a lot of questions in here about what to do if your teenager doesn't want to spend time with you. There's just a whole lot of questions about, I want to bond, but they don't want to talk to me. How do you have a teenager talk to you when they want to be with their friends, they want to be in the room, and they do not want to talk to you?
Yes. This is also from a sociological perspective, this is new, right? Like our parents didn't necessarily, they might have wanted to bond with us, but it wasn't like this expectation of emotional closeness that we have now. And so some of it is like just dialing down your expectations a little bit, because it is your adolescence, job to individuate from you, and their brain is really primed to bond with their friends. And so, if they are out bonding with their friends in person, that is fantastic. That's their first priority, and that's okay. That's actually really good for them. The second is to just dial back the pressure to bond, and to really one of the questions that I saw was, I want my teenager to open up and not shut me out, right? And so to think about bonding in a lower pressure kind of a way, right? Like watching a television show together, finding one that you both really like, and really letting them choose it, and finding some amusement. And a lot of the shows that the kids are watching today are kind of horrifying to us as parents. Well, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but that's a great opportunity actually to have some of these conversations that are really relevant to their adolescence, right? Like instead of sitting them down or trying to talk to them in the car, that never actually really worked very well for me, right? Like having something, watching Hot or Not, or whatever the latest reality show is that that is disturbing, like enjoying it with them, like the guilty pleasure of it, but also using it as an opportunity to talk about what you find to be so incredibly cringy, and what you hope they never do, and what the different values that our family holds, and where does this anyway. So watching television together. By the way, television does not seem to contribute to the the depression and anxiety in the same way that social media does. Like when we start to separate out, that's one of the things that's happened, is that these things have been separated out. So all screen time is not the same.
Right. One answers back and one doesn't, right? The TV doesn't talk to you about you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too this, you're too that, and and you're not invited to the sleepover this weekend, by the way. And here's a cool picture that there's just so much that comes at them that terrorizes their sense of self, which is just such a little fledgling self at 13, 14, 15, and to have that much negative coming in just free willingly is clearly part of the danger. So one of the questions that came in is, well, there are kids that want to be with their friends, And then I want to have time with them. But the other is that my kids only want to be with us and I can't get them to socialize. So what do you say to those parents?
Yeah, so this is where, oh, you probably know much more about this than I do. So you got to answer this afterwards. But I was going to say, this is where, understanding a little bit about, how small exposures can really help a kid with anxieties, right?
Mhm.
So when we're anxious as humans, we tend to avoid the things that we're anxious about, like socializing with other kids, right? And we feel a sense of relief just by thinking about avoiding the thing we're anxious about. But of course, it bites us in the long run. And so this is a part of the difficulty and the discomfort that our kids need to learn to experience before it becomes a full-fledged phobia, right? Because what happens is that the nervous system starts to have larger and larger responses to smaller and smaller stimulus or anxieties. And so we want to just break it up for parents. So first, inviting another family over so the kids can still be with the parents, right? Like in their own home where they're already comfortable, limiting the amount of time, just running into people, and, just having like small little interactions, just really starting to expose them to it to help them not avoid.
Yeah, I mean, really, this gets to a broader topic, which I'm sure other parents are thinking about who have neurodiverse children on the other end of the spectrum, because really this is genetic. I mean, inborn characteristics. 50% of how we are is supposedly genetics. And so some children are wild kids, sensation seekers, risk takers. And then we have to kind of pull the corral in a little bit and figure out how to keep them safe. And some that are anxious and avoidant need to be nudged out in exactly the way you talked about. And then we've got parents that are dealing with their own genetics, because often anxious kids come from anxious parents. And so sometimes they have to work with that nudging out and feeling bold and brave themselves. Because one of the questions that came in is, how do you encourage this autonomy thing when there's so many terrible things out in the world? And I went, well, that's probably not a good message to send. Of course, there've always been scary things in the world and we have to keep them safe, but we also have to promote independence and competence building, right? So for some competence building with the attention deficit, the child with attention deficit disorder, I hate that term, but because it could be that the rest of us are task switching disorder, but we put it on them that they're deficient because they are so proficient in being interested in a lot of things. So excuse me to all the people that get labeled that way, but some need to be made a little safer by pulling the corral in, and some need to be nudged out. And we know our children the best and what they need, but in both places you adapt some of what we're talking about for your child. And I think with the child with attention deficit disorder, it's really hard, and it goes to another question that parents had here, which was, how do you impose boundaries when the kids just have meltdowns and hate on you?
Yeah, I mean, and that's really hard. I feel like, and again, this is an area where you have a lot of expertise. I would love to hear what you have to say. It's very, very, what I will say is, first of all, it's very painful when our kids hate on us. And I think that we've overly normalized it in adolescence, like the sort of name calling and hate that comes. It's going to happen as a normal part of individuation to a certain extent. But I also think that this is a generation that has learned how to use anger to manipulate.
Yeah.
And that is not normal. It is not okay. It is totally okay to feel frustrated and angry when you don't get what you want. It is not okay to use name calling and all the sort of bad behavior that culturally, I think Americans in particular have kind of normalized. So it's a painful thing to have your kid mad at you and to be angry and behaving badly when they're mad at you. It is quite painful. It is also, the bad behavior is not okay. It is okay if they're mad at you, right? Like they aren't always going to get what they want. And that their anger shouldn't change your mind as a parent, right? Like they aren't entitled to get whatever they want. They can't possibly understand what our priorities totally as parents and what we can afford in a way that is meaningful to them. Sometimes they're just going to be mad. And because we as parents, you know, again, culturally have this expectation of emotional closeness now, and this sort of in a way that sort of bleeds into friendship, right? Like it would never be okay to be so angry with, well, not never, but like it would be more unusual for a friend to be so angry with you. You would know that you really did something wrong. And that is just not true with our kids, right? Our kids, like, they are going to push the boundaries to find out where they are. And then when they push up against those boundaries, when we say no, they get mad. It's frustrating to be a kid sometimes.
Right.
And that's okay. They need to learn how to deal with that frustration in a way that's not abusive or, you know, isn't really bad behavior.
Right. Well, I thoroughly agree with what you're saying, and I hope parents don't hear it's not okay that they can't use this language and so forth, to come down harder on their children with authoritarianism, because we know that permissiveness is, as you know, has as poor outcomes as authoritarianism. And the thing I'd like to stress in what you said is we need to accept that they're angry and accept that they will have these feelings in this moment, and say, by the way, we're going to have to clean up your language here, but that, you know, we'll talk about that another time. I'm not going to let you go to the party, or I'm still going to take your phone, or whatever it is. I accept your anger, and I'm going to have this boundary. And then probably at that moment of high conflict is not the time. And by the way, I'm not going to accept that language, because I heard that talk the other day and they said it wasn't okay. Our first line of approach here is do no harm. And you know, one of the things you emphasize in your writing, as I do, and all of us have for 50 years since Diana Baumrein's research in longitudinal study, is authority, warmth and connection, secure attachment, and respect for thoughts and feelings. Respect for their independent thoughts and feelings doesn't mean we cave. It just means I accept that you really, really are. They might have said, I hate you and I think you should go to hell. And we're going to talk later about, you know, express your feelings in a different way. But right now, I thoroughly see that you're upset, and I'm going to say no in the way I maintained it. It's completely understandable that you would be upset that you can't get what you want. And then in a separate time, you can talk about what's not acceptable, and that they need to use some of that brake muscle that they use outside of the world with us as well, because they just get sloppy if parents let some of these things go. Right. But I think sometimes we got to separate the targeting that
totally agree
awful behavior from, because a lot of parents will kind of go wrong when they go, I can't let them get away with this. And that's what engages them into a power struggle for the next 20 minutes. And it gets worse and worse as we stay engaged, which is back to how we need to be calming ourselves and encourage and modeling that. Okay. We have so many more questions. Can I ask you? One more.
I totally agree with you on that, by the way. I think that that's a really important clarification, that, you know, we can always come back to it later and tell them how we felt, right? Tell them that it was painful for us or whatever, but having already not caved. Right? Help.
You know what I want to talk about, because we have so few minutes left, is you ended your book in such a wonderful way, Christine. You know, I think it was 2 weeks ago, our Surgeon General, dear Dr. Murty, has put depression, anxiety, mental health of teenagers, you know, as a priority, which is so wonderful for us that care so much about young ones. And he talked about loneliness and isolation because we're spending so much time inside. And you also write very well about, you know, their dangers outside with whatever, you know, can go on in the outside, but what about inside? And there's pornography, and there's sexting, and there's dangerous sites, and that they're not necessarily safe if they're inside the house. There's, you know, there's dangers in both places. And yet part of this being inside so much is that we're actually in different rooms, and it's almost a metaphor what's happening out in the world because of the disconnect made worse with the pandemic, of course. So the way you tie up your book is sort of a manifesto for the Great Reconnect, which of course is what this Parent Map series is all about, parents connecting nationally or locally or in their neighborhood or in whatever ways for support. So you want to end with some sociologist comments about the Great Reconnect?
Oh, well, I'm actually really interested in what you found compelling about that, because I could speak about meaning and purpose, but I feel like that's almost taking it away from what you just suggested.
That's sweet. I feel like one of the things that happens as a mental health provider is that when people have pretty normative problems of adolescence, like moodiness, risk-taking, arguments with their kids, really bad times where everybody's having an amygdala hijack at the same time, they get ashamed and then they don't reach out to other people. And yet, if that's normative, it's more often than not to have conditions of moodiness and arguments and behavior challenges, then why aren't we all talking about it and sharing ideas and sense of humor and walks outside so that we can feel less alone with life as it is, which is tough, but also life with teenagers? Because again, 80% of people at least have struggles with teenagers, and they, a good 80% come out pretty well at the other end. But in the middle of it, we can become so isolated with a sense of shame that, my teenagers don't look so good right now. So I think we need to talk more and bond more with each other, not just with our kids.
Yes. And I think that is such a lovely way to end too, to think about, as parents, our own connections with other adults. Like, how do we we're all worried about the isolation of adolescents and our kids right now, but how do we take care of ourselves first, right? How do we help ourselves get to that place where we have enough social support that we can approach our kids high emotionality, let's just put it that way, with that sense of calm and that skillfulness and the things that we need. And when we don't respond in a way that is calm or skillful or any of the ways that we intend, that we don't retreat into like our own private misery, but instead, we are able to call a friend or call upon a community and say, oh, that didn't go well. Like, help me recover, help me integrate this experience.
I'm going to jump in because clearly we could have the 12 editions of the Christine and Laura speaker series. We'll consider that, but a few things. First of all, we're going to put up a quick poll that will actually let us have all of our audience say where they're from officially, so we know where they signed in. That's number one. Number two, thank you all so much for coming. I think I have just been watching this enormous number of questions, along with the gratitude for the work that both of you do and how supported parents feel listening to you. And it was really fun to listen to. I also want to invite people to our next talk, which maybe Christine and Laura want to join. It is called Transforming Trauma and Navigating Overwhelm, with trauma specialist and author Laura Vander-Noot-Lipsky. And we just hope that everyone will join for that, and cannot thank you enough for your time and wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you.